Empire.
Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Conn Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube. Hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Empire Media, AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up now on my 53-man roster projection, and it's guaranteed to have a few guys wrong. I'm going to go over some of that in a minute because I'm here to wrap up the Commanders preseason with their 20-10 win over the Patriots. Going to get into a lot of topics about guys who helped themselves. Did Martavis Bryant do enough? What do these roster battles look like after tonight? And trying to piece all this stuff together. So you can give that a read on ESPN.com. Also on Tuesday night, I will be doing a live stream show after the final cut. So let's do it 8 o'clock Tuesday night, doing a live stream show. I'll get a chance to talk to hopefully Dan Quinn and or Adam Peters about some of the moves they made. Keep in mind, the roster will change again as of Wednesday because this team has the number 2 waiver claim. They will use it. They'll be aggressive, I think, doing that. I think there's a few spots they could look to fill with some moves after the final cuts because that number 2 waiver claim. And as Dan Quinn said tonight, they don't want to be in this position again because it means you've had a bad year. But the benefit of a bad year for a new group is they get a chance to maybe get a couple guys who could come on this roster and help them. And there are some spots that are very weak, and we'll go over those in a minute. One guy I think who really helped himself tonight was Martavis Bryant. But I'm going to remind you to have some perspective on where he's at in everything. He finished with 3 catches for 20 yards and a nice slant catch for a touchdown. Drew 2 pass interference penalties on deep balls. That's all good. He had a nice block on a touchdown run by Michael Wiley. Now, he didn't create the hole. What he did on that play, he didn't seal the edge. What he did is he went and got his man. He kind of blocked a safety or defensive back from being a last man who may have gotten Wiley. So, but a nice job nonetheless, because to be honest, I felt like last week against Miami, the blocking wasn't there. And, he hadn't been in the game. So you cut him some slack with that. But what does this mean for him? Keep in mind who he's going up against. So, and I only say that to temper what people are saying, because some people kind of jump into some conclusions or whatever that is a little bit early. When they signed him, the thought was, hey, again, if nothing else, and he could end up helping them on the practice squad, keep him there, develop. I don't think anybody's going to go pick him up, and they're not going to pick him up based off what he did in the fourth quarter of the last preseason game, because I think teams know that the guys he's doing it against are not the guys he'd be facing on Sundays during the season. So does it help him, though, maybe get a 6th roster spot? I think it has to help him. I don't know to what extent, because I did not have him on the roster, and I still didn't have him on the roster of the game. I had to turn my stuff in before the end of the game. So his fourth quarter, I wasn't able to take that into account when I'm doing my roster. I don't know how much it would have changed, because I know that there's still a ways to go for him to learn the offense, to get where they need. I don't think anybody would pick him up if he's cut. Therefore, if you put him on the practice squad, you can let him develop. Then maybe you get something more of that down the road, because there's still more to learn. But I do think it was a good showing for him. And it's a good story for how much time he has missed to come back and do this. And Dan Quinn singled out he and Trace McSorley after the game. He thought it was a cool moment for those two guys to combine on a game-winning touchdown pass or to score, game-winning drives. McSorley's from this area. Bryant with the long absence from playing in the NFL. So if nothing else, that's a good moment for Bryant. Where it goes, I don't know. But Dan Quinn did say he felt like he showed some grit just from the perseverance of his story, what he's had to go through to get to this point. I think that's obviously there was things that he was fighting, demons that led him to be suspended indefinitely. But again, a good showing in the fourth quarter of a third preseason game. What you need to see, what we haven't seen, is how he does against starting caliber players. That to me is the next step. So if if he does it in practice, if that's where you get your shot in the practice squad, to show that if that's where they go, because I don't know exactly what they're going to do at receiver. I think, listen, I mean, you could make a case for him for sure to be like a sixth receiver. They're not going to put him in there as a number 2 receiver. He's not, these guys are just further ahead in knowing the offense, et cetera. But could he warrant a spot ahead of a Byron Pringle, let's say? Pringle played a lot tonight. I know there are times in practice where Pringle showed something, but has he shown enough to warrant that spot automatically? Well, no, I don't think so. It wouldn't shock me if they get another receiver with, somehow, right? Maybe through the waiver claims, because I don't think they're done with that position. But again, for Brian, it was a good night. And, which is for him, that's what you want to see. So what it means from here, don't know. But I do know, like I said, I'm not trying to take away from him, but I try to put it in perspective, because that's what you have to do with this. And you take that into account, but you also have to take into account the fact that he's a big guy who can run, and they don't have anybody like that. You also have to take that into account, because if Bryson Tremaine makes it, why is it? Well, because he's done that. Now, Tremaine showed stuff in practice, but he, in the games, he hasn't done all this. Now, I do think Tremaine showed some good blocking as well, so that helps. But like I said, for Bryant, the benefit of him, big guy, pretty good speed. There aren't a lot of guys like that. So if they felt like put him as a 6th receiver, let him, you could, if he's not ready, you can make him inactive. That's fine too. So, and until he's ready to contribute at a higher level, against a higher level of players that he'd be facing, that, but anyways, bottom line is he helped himself, and we'll see what the next step is. So let's now take a look at some of these spots. I guess I'm looking at what Quinn talked about too. And he talked about Jamin Davis, and I think his development defensive end, and I'll get into all that in a minute. And again, he stressed the fluidity of the roster. So Tuesday's cuts, well, even if there are going to be a handful of guys who make it Tuesday who end up getting cut the next day and probably going to the practice squad. Some guys, they don't want to put through waivers that first day, let teams kind of, fill their gaps and all that, and then expose them enough, at the next day to say, keep them around or whatever. So it's going to change. And that's one thing that he did. And by the way, and going back to Quinn with Bryant, and it's what I just said, the one thing he says, you feel his size, he felt his competitiveness. And that's a good thing, because that's one of the things Quinn stresses more than anything, is the competitiveness. And like I said, last week against Miami, not that I didn't think he was competitive, I just felt like he wasn't a guy who was quite sure of himself out there. Tonight, I felt like you saw somebody who was playing a little bit more freer and did a nice job. So again, 3 catches, 20 yards, but it was the PI yards that were a lot that added to that. So good night for him. Good fun. That's right. And he didn't play a whole lot before that final quarter, but he finished strong. So anyways, let's get to some of the roster stuff. So I don't want to take too long on all this. Looking at the quarterbacks, Jeff Driscoll tonight, 12 of 18, 73 yards, 1 pick, a bad pick, but he did a nice job this summer. So personally, I would have him on there as a third quarterback, especially with Mariota having some, the groin issue. I think he'll be okay. Sam Hartman did not play tonight. Now, there were like 34 guys who did not dress tonight. The bulk of those guys who don't dress tonight are going to make the roster. There were a handful of guys, I think Hartman, one of them, and then Trent Scott, who are dealing with an injury issue, and they're not guaranteed. If you're healthy and you're a scratch tonight, you're on the roster. So, and I'll get to a few other of those in a minute. But anyway, so I think with Hartman, the question will be, could they pass him through because they do like him. And I think there may be, and even Quinn said that he was a little bit surprised by Driscoll. So I think they kind of went into this thing, probably figuring if you keep 3, you look at Hartman. But, and I even asked a couple of people around the league, do you think he'd be claimed, meaning Hartman, if he got waived? One didn't think so, because he felt like it'd be a hard guy to bring in as a quarterback to put on your 53-man roster. Another one felt like maybe he would, because if you like him, and let's say you like him, you have a couple of veterans already, and you want a guy to develop, well, you could bring him out there, right? So the point is, it was kind of mixed. So I think if they really want to keep him around and see if he can develop as a backup to Jaden Daniels down the road, then you keep him. If not, Driscoll has had a better summer, and I think the way he uses his legs, I think, could help him. And with Mariota's health issue, you may want to have another experienced guy on that roster just in case there's anything more with it. And Mariota was apparently, it seems like he'll be okay, but you never know. So that would be the one thing there. And the other thing would you really want two rookies among your top three? But then again, it's your first year of a program. You're going to do it and you like the guy, this is the year to do it. For the entire month of August, the Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is offering multiple ways to save on climbing and zip lining and 50% off axe throwing. There are only a few Sundays left without football, so it's time to get that last summer adventure on the schedule. There's no better place to spend the last few days and nights of the summer with friends and family. Don't just take our word for it. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring was named the #1 aerial adventure park in North America by USA Today. Anytime you're thinking about reaching new heights, make sure you know before you go. The Adventure Park at Sandy Spring is the only ACCT accredited park in Maryland or Virginia. So there you have it, folks. For the rest of the summer, you can get the best climbing, zip lining, and axe throwing in the country up to 50% off right here in the DMV. Reserve your adventure today at www.theadventurepark.com/Kime. All right, running back. So the guy people were watching tonight was Kaz Allen. Was he going to make a splash to force his way onto the roster? Last year, he was in the same spot. He fumbled in the game, fumbled a punt. Well, tonight, he really didn't do anything that stood out. And I'll be honest, we know they like him. And Kingsbury compared him and didn't compare him to Deebo Samuel. People always mistake that. He said he'd play a Deebo-type role, not a Deebo-type player, but play that role. In other words, a guy who can run passes from the slot and he can carry the ball in the backfield. But did he do enough to warrant a roster spot? Well, they like him. They like his quickness. But again, you have to look at, would somebody claim him based off what we saw out here in the preseason? Well, he didn't really have that kind of an impact in the preseason, which is good for them because they could, if they wanted to, you can put him through waivers, get him back on the practice squad, elevate him for the first couple of games if you want to use him, and then see if he warrants a roster spot after that. So, but he was the guy I was looking at, and he returned punts. But he didn't really do anything there. Fair catch, let one, did a nice job not fielding one inside his own 10, ran up, ball goes in the end zone, good job. And then he returned a kickoff, got hit hard. So, but I don't think that's a bad thing for them that, because again, they can then maybe slide him out of the practice squad if they want, and then, keep someone else or claim someone else, because it wouldn't shock me if they claimed another running back. Right now, I would have personally Robinson, Eckler, and then Jeremy McNichols. Now, those have been the top three running backs since the spring. That's the order, all spring, right? So that would mean Chris Rodriguez wouldn't make it. And then Michael Wiley is another one I'd wonder about. But Kaz Allen is the guy that you really wonder about because he can help them in multiple spots, possibly as a returner. But if they feel like they lose him, then you could see him making it, right? So receiver, right now, we talked a lot about Brian. Right now, my initial 53 had 6 with McLaurin, De'Ami Brown, Luke McCaffrey, Zacchaeus, and then Crowder and Pringle as your returners. So Pringle has been working as a #1 kick returner all summer, right? Crowder would be your punt returner. Crowder did not return a punt this preseason. He also did not dress tonight. He is healthy. So, and he also can help you still as a slot receiver in addition to Zacchaeus. That's part of the reason why they traded Dotson, was because they knew if they felt like he was just going to be a slot receiver for them, they had other guys who could fill that role, and Crowder is one of them. So that's assuming I don't know if they're going to, but that's assuming they keep 6. Tremaine is obviously in there, and we already talked about Bryant would certainly be in that mix because what he offers, regardless of who he showed it against, but what he offers, so he has to be in that mix for that. Anyway, so we talked a lot about that. And again, I'm assuming they keep 6. Don't know that for sure. Offensive line had 9. Did not have Braden Daniels on there. I do have Chris Paul on there as a tackle. I thought he did a nice job at right tackle. And even tonight, I felt like he anchored well. I felt like he did a good job. We've seen him play inside as a guard. I don't know if in their system how good they want their guards to pull. And I don't know that that's necessarily his strength. But if you want a guy who can play guard tackle, well, he's showing that he can play tackle for you. And so, I think I kind of like him there, and liked him. Trent Scott, I don't know that he showed enough to warrant a spot. That's a spot where if I'm on the waiver claims, I'm looking at that, right? That's a spot I'm looking at for sure. Michael Dieter is a backup center that he was working as number 2 center all spring and summer. I don't know that he had the great camp, but he's an experienced guy. He can play center and guard. And then Julian Good-Jones or Ricky Stromberg, one of those two. Well, Stromberg was working mostly at guard, especially tonight. Julian Good-Jones, I put him on and Stromberg not. I don't know that I saw enough of him at guard, especially in the pooling action, to warrant that spot. And again, I always keep wondering what the impact of that injury was on him. And maybe could you get him on the practice squad, let him develop there and see if he can kind of work his way back. I mean, I don't know that it is affecting him, but I didn't see the same guy that I felt like I saw last year. Not yet. So, and then we know the starters, and Coleman didn't play tonight, et cetera. So I don't know if there's anybody else there to really, for me to discuss at this point. Tight end, I had 3. I could easily see 4. And the 4th would, then it's like, do you keep Cole Turner or do you keep Colson Yankoff? They like Yankoff. The thing with Turner, Turner dropped a pass tonight. He had another one that looked like, I think some people considered a drop. I don't look like it was, I'm not sure. It would have been a hard catch. He also had a really nice catch late in the game over the middle. And he plays a lot of the top special teams units. That stuff matters. But then you watch him as a blocker, like he's not in line. He doesn't play with that same strength that I think that others do. So is that going to be a factor? But then, so he's kind of a very mixed summer for him. Yankoff, we know they like him. And so, he can play special teams, some of those same roles, but is he ready to go into a game and contribute if he has to? So you could probably get him onto the practice squad if you wanted to go with just 3. And that's what I did now. I kind of went back and forth on Turner, and I think they're doing the same thing, to be honest.
Hey, it's Bram Weinstein here, voice of the Commanders, and of course, frequent guest of this podcast, The John Keim Report. I wanted to let you all know that my show, which airs at 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. on ESPN 630, is now exclusively produced by Empire Media, my company, and is going to be distributed through our network. So I'm asking you, please, if you subscribe to this show and love this show, give mine a try as well. Subscribe to the Bram Weinstein Show wherever you get your podcasts. And many of the shows and many of the elements that are in the show will be available on the Empire Media YouTube channel. We're going to talk a ton of Commanders and other DC sports. Check it out.
D-line, I had 10, but I had 10 because I consider they have Dante Fowler listed as a linebacker. He's primarily worked in a pass rush role where it's up, down, sometimes you're up, sometimes you're down. So however you classify him. So if you classify as linebacker, then I had 9 guys. If you classify as a lineman, then I had 10, which is a lot. I thought they'd only keep 9. But again, if you classify Fowler as a linebacker, then they are only keeping 9. I kept Javonte Jean-Baptiste. I like him. I like the length. I'd want to keep him on the roster. And then Jamin Davis, I had him on there. I think he was still a little bit on the bubble, but I think he's safe. Then it comes down to Ridgeway or Mathis. I went for Ridgeway instead of Mathis. I think they both had good games tonight. I think they both played with some power. I think Ridgeway offers a little bit more ability to get something in the pass rush game. I don't know that they would keep both of them. I think that would be asking a lot. I think they could. I would not be shocked if they end up being able to trade one of them. I know I would say this. I know some teams have called on John Ridgeway, so I think that would be something to watch for sure. And then, but I don't know what'll happen because then it depends on do you get something? If not, would you just want to keep them or whatever? So, but I think they both had good games. Ridgeway did I think Mathis had some strong plays against the guards a couple times. And then Mathis did. And then Ridgeway, I felt like did a good job playing with some strength inside, making some plays, some good hustle plays as well. So good night for both. Makes it tougher. I felt like they were very close coming in, and I still think it is. I went with Ridgeway, but a lot of that was I think Mathis has actually played, to be honest. I think 2 of his better showings have been the last 2 preseason games. So, and my thought with Ridgeway was before then, So maybe, I don't know if Mathis has been working ahead of him a little bit. So it wouldn't shock me at all, but I don't think they keep two big bodies. Dan Quinn likes to use, he likes quickness and getting into as a pass rusher more than anything. Mathis is going to be more of a big body run stopper type of the two. And I think Ridgway's a little bit more like that. But I think he offers a little bit more ability to get in the backfield as well. Don't know. We'll see. Then KJ Henry I have on. I like KJ Henry. One thing tonight that they did, they were rushing him from defensive tackle a couple times. That was late. It was in a 2-minute situation, or actually less than 1 minute left in the half. So it was an obvious passing situation. Put him inside, get that quickness in there. Drew a holding penalty on one of those with a stunt and did a nice job there. I like where he's developed, so he'd be on there too. So I think the other ones are pretty obvious. Linebacker, I had 5, but I consider Dominique Hampton a linebacker, not a safety, because that's where they've been working him as, and he gives you a big body who can run, and I think that's going to help on special teams. Jordan McGee, I don't know what's going to happen. He'll be on the roster. It's just a matter of, do they keep him and then put him on IR because of the knee situation? But initially, that might only be a 4-week injury, which would mean he would be back for maybe the second, or probably might miss only 2 games in that case. I don't know yet where that's at, but if they put him on IR, then you could get someone else in there, but you got to keep him first to do that. And then obviously the other ones, I had Michael Walker over Pittman. I could see it going the other way as well. They were both playing they're both still in there late in the game, or later in the game in the second half. Cornerback went with 6, got your 5, and then Tariq Castro-Fields. Chiganuzium is another guy that would be on that list because he's competitive. He plays special teams, but I went with the experience with Castro-Fields. Who knows? That's another spot where you could see, where could they look? That's a spot. And then safety, I kept 5. This was one of the hardest ones, because it means a guy like Derek Forrest may not make it. He was definitely on the bubble. He was out there obviously playing a lot tonight. And listen, I think he offers you something. He's physical. I like the way he plays. I felt like he'd be a Dan Quinn type player because of physical play, but he missed some time in camp with the injuries, and that allowed a guy like Tyler Owens to really ascend. And then I think Jeremy Reeves would be safe because of special teams, even though he was playing out there. He had a good night tonight. And then, you have Quan Martin, Jeremy Chin, and Percy Butler would be your third safety. That's where he's been working all summer. He did not play tonight. So there's your hint. So that's the way I'm looking at it. If you guys have if you have, different players that you like, let me know, or put it on YouTube, Twitter, whatever it is. But, because again, this is just an opinion. There are a lot of years where I feel like I have a really, really good handle at the bottom end of the roster because, you may know more, you may have better conversations with people. I think this has been a tougher year to get some of those. But you kind of it's more piecing things together more than before, when I felt like you had more information to go on to see who might make it, who might not, et cetera. So this year it's been a little bit tougher for that. That's why I think there's going to be some discrepancies in what I see, what comes out versus what I or others have, because really you just don't know. And in the end, does it matter what I say? No. So it's just more, it's a fun exercise, but it's also a way to talk about how you see this roster, how you see these guys. I do think, like I said, that they're going to continue to look for guys on the waiver wire because this roster is far from complete, and which is smart. So the other thing I want to talk about, a couple of things. Cade York, 2 for 2, made both extra points. Good night for him. So it's a good first outing for him. If he can do this, kid's got a really strong kid. York has a really strong leg, so it would be good for this team if he can come through, because then you could have your kicker for a long time. If not, back to the drawing board. The other thing talked about Jamin Davis. He was playing kick coverage in the fourth quarter. Like it just kind of shows you where he's at with things. But the guy hustles, and I think it's the way he's embraced his role is what has also impressed this coaching staff. Javante Jean-Baptiste in the fourth quarter, making plays in kick coverage. Got to like a big guy who's doing that. And, I think that was good. By the way, one of the biggest plays of the game was Trace McSorley ran around the left end, lowers his shoulder against the cornerback just on the sideline, knocks him over, basically gets up and stares at him. and the entire sidelines was going crazy. Like that's the kind of stuff that like players love that stuff. Just like when Tressway made a tackle earlier this year in the preseason, these guys love that. And it's like to see a guy like that. And they were going crazy for Brian as well, too, because they know his, and this is Quinn said this, but they understand his story and what this would mean to what it means to him and how long he'd been out, what was taken away from him, what he's trying to get back. And so like they really, I think, really were happy for him about his touchdown. So anyways, that's some of the stuff. And then Drake May played for the Patriots. So I know there's a lot of Drake May fans that will, who root for this franchise because they want to see this team draft him. And, it's hard to say. Like, first of all, the New England line is offensive line is not very good. That's, I think, clear. I was concerned that maybe he didn't go to the best place for him. I'm not sure that the Patriots they're not what they were. And, we'll see how it develops, but I don't know that it's going to be a great spot to develop a quarterback at this point. But when you watch him, there are a lot of things that he showed. He's like, okay, this is what I saw in college. You saw the ability to step up and make a big throw down the field. You saw him slide, but hit a guy, but maybe throw to the wrong shoulder. So instead of giving a guy a chance to run, maybe you're turning him inside to where contact is and preventing a run after the catch. You saw a couple missed throws. You saw a lot of what he offers. I mean, and there was, and again, inaccuracy can mean shoulder, right? It's not if you complete it or not, it's which shoulder you throw it to. Are you giving a guy a chance to run? And sometimes I wonder about one of the things that Jaden Daniels does very, very well, and Dan Quinn talked about this before the draft, he talked about the other day, is the processing speed. And one thing you haven't seen really is him getting receivers in trouble. You're seeing him give guys a chance to run after the catch because he boom, boom, boom. I don't see that with May, but I'm also not breaking down for him from an all 22 perspective to see what is he seeing, what is not there. But what I do know is that for Daniels, right? And so when I watch May, I still think this is a guy who would be best helped by having Jacoby Brissett start and then sitting for a little bit. And, to keep in mind, like Daniel started 55 games in college. This guy started 2 years. It's not a lot. So there's a gap there from that. And again, I'm not revisiting. They should have taken Daniels and they did. But because they played them tonight and he was a guy that they had looked at. Again, J.J. McCarthy was second on their list after Daniels. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. And finally, we had a tour of the stadium before the game and they have that Tunnel Club. Looks pretty good. Like they're putting money into this. And about the Sean Taylor statue now. Which is a really good thing for them to do. I think it speaks to how Josh Harris is approaching things with this franchise. And then we also had a chance to talk to Josh Harris after the game. He talked about the stadium, and there's really no update on anything with it. They're probably going to have to wait till after the election to see what happens in the Senate. They're waiting for that bill with RFK to see, is that a possibility? And I asked Harris about like that 2030 target date. How firm is that? He's like, that's a realistic target date. But I will say, if they want to get to RFK, they may have to wait longer. That's some of the vibes you get. And if that's the case, are you willing to do that? If you have to wait a couple of years to get there, or do you, and not knowing maybe if you will or you won't, or do you take the shirt, do you go somewhere else because like you need to get it done, right? Or because you're not convinced that even if you wait a couple of years, that it will get done to what you need. So that's something else he talked about. The team name that came up, and Grant Paulson asked him about, have you done research? Have you done any research, not him personally, but the team into the team name and the Commanders in particular? And the thing that he stressed is that right now they're focusing on things that they want to get the product right on the field. You want to get the stadium right because fans are going there right now. And he said he wants to focus on things that unify the team, the city, the players, and reopening that team name storyline right now is not it. Like he knows where that would go, but there's also the priorities, and this has been said all along. There was nothing new he said with that. He said it along. If they ever look at it, it would be a couple years from now. And as he reiterated, they're not going back to the old name, in case anybody still wondered. But it was brought up, and I do think like in a few years, could they look at it? Of course, I wouldn't be surprised if they did. But I think, like he said, they're doing other things to kind of reconnect to their past. And I think some of those things will be announced over the course of time. The Gold Pants are one, would not shock me at all if in a year or two we see the old look from before the name change, et cetera. So those are some of the things. Loves Jaden Daniels. I think we know that. And there you go. Those are some of the highlights. Anyways, folks, that's a long update from me. I do expect them to start cutting some players on Monday. Maybe a handful, maybe around a dozen or so, and probably guys that you would expect to go. The Tuesday, the 4:00 deadline is when they have to have it filed. So that's the big day. Like I said, I'll be talking to you Tuesday night, a live stream show, 8 p.m. Eastern time. So join me there, and I'll talk to you next time.